Millions vanish every year without a trace. But Cassidy didn't disappear. She walked willingly straight into hell. To save her father, she offered a ruthless syndicate boss her life. He laughed, slid a contract across the mahogany desk and whispered an alternative. What he demanded wasn't death, it was damnation. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Arthur Rowe's dilapidated Southside office, mimicking the frantic rhythm of Cassidy's own racing heart. She stood frozen, staring at the leather-bound ledger resting open on the mahogany desk. The numbers inked on the pages were staggering, impossible sums that made her vision blur. $3.2 million. It wasn't a bank loan. It wasn't a bad mortgage. It was a debt owed to a ghost corporation widely known to be the front for the Vitiello syndicate. Arthur, a man who had once been the pillar of their community, sat crumbling in his leather chair. His hands shook violently as he pressed a glass of cheap bourbon to his lips. He had embezzled the money slowly, desperately, trying to save Cassidy's mother from a terminal illness that ultimately claimed her anyway. Now the debt had matured, and the collectors were not men who accepted apologies or payment plans. "They gave me 48 hours, Cass," Arthur choked out, his voice a hollow rasp. "After that, they don't just take the house. They take everything. They take you." Cassidy felt a cold dread pool in her stomach, but she forced her spine to straighten. She was 26, a mid-level architect engaged to the city's brightest assistant district attorney, Liam Watson. Her life was supposed to be safe, predictable, and entirely insulated from the dark underbelly of Chicago. But looking at her broken father, she knew safety was an illusion. "I won't let them touch you," Cassidy said, her voice eerily calm despite the terror gripping her throat. "I'll handle this." "There is no handling this," Arthur wept, burying his face in his hands. "Damien Vitiello doesn't negotiate. He consumes." Cassidy didn't wait to hear the rest of his despair. She turned on her heel, grabbing her trench coat. She knew where Kensington Global Logistics was located, a gleaming, sterile skyscraper in the Loop that served as the legitimate face of Damien Vitiello's empire. She didn't tell Liam. She couldn't. If Liam, with his rigid morality and crusade against organized crime, knew her father was in bed with the Mafia, he would be obligated to arrest Arthur himself. She was entirely alone. The lobby of Kensington Global was a monument to cold power. Expanse of white marble, silent security personnel in tailored suits, and an atmosphere that felt utterly devoid of oxygen. When Cassidy approached the reception desk and demanded to see Damien Vitiello regarding Arthur Rowe's account, the receptionist didn't blink. A silent phone call was made, and within seconds, a massive man with dead eyes escorted her to a private elevator that required a biometric scan to operate. The penthouse office was a stark contrast to the sterile lobby. It was dark, rich, and steeped in old-world intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, and the scent of expensive cedar and faint cigar smoke hung heavy in the air. Behind a massive desk of reclaimed ebony sat Damien Vitiello. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a lethal aristocrat. High cheekbones, dark hair impeccably styled, and eyes the colour of a stormy ocean that pinned her to the floor the moment she walked in. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than her car, and his presence commanded the room so absolutely that Cassidy almost forgot how to breathe. "Cassidy Rowe," Damien said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. "I was wondering when Arthur's collateral would finally show up." "I am not collateral," Cassidy stated, stepping forward, refusing to let her hands tremble. "I'm here to settle my father's debt." Damien leaned back in his chair, resting his chin on his steepled fingers. A dark, amused smile played on his lips. "With what? An architect's salary? Unless you plan on building me a fortress out of spite, you don't have $3 million. "I don't have the money," Cassidy admitted, her voice dropping. She stepped closer, placing both hands flat on his desk. "But I have my life. Take me. Kill me. Enslave me. Whatever it is you do to balance your ledgers. Let my father go. He's an old, sick man. I am young. I can work for you or I can die for him. Just wipe his slate clean." Silence stretched across the room, heavy and suffocating. Damien's eyes traced the frantic pulse jumping at the base of her throat, moving up to her defiant, terrified eyes. He stood up slowly. He was much taller than she anticipated, predatory in his grace as he walked around the desk to stand merely inches from her. "You think this is a movie, Ms. Rowe?" Damien murmured, his proximity intoxicating, smelling of bergamot and danger. "You think you can martyr yourself and I'll just put a bullet in your pretty head and call it square?" He reached out, his knuckles lightly grazing her cheek. She flinched but held her ground. "Your life is utterly worthless to me in death. And manual labour, please. I have thousands of people for that." "Then what do you want?" Cassidy demanded, desperation cracking her facade. Damien leaned in, his lips hovering dangerously close to her ear. "I want something much darker than your life. I want your betrayal." He stepped back, picking up a sleek tablet from his desk and tapping the screen before handing it to her. On it was a candid photograph of Cassidy kissing Liam Watson outside a coffee shop. "Your fiancé is a nuisance," Damien stated coldly. "He's building a RICO case against my associates. He thinks he's untouchable because he wears the badge of righteous justice. I want to break him, not kill him. Martyrs are bad for business. I want him dismantled, disgraced, and thrown into a federal penitentiary." Cassidy dropped the tablet as if it burned her. "No, I won't. Liam is a good man. I won't help you frame him." "I never said frame," Damien corrected sharply, his eyes flashing with a dangerous intelligence. "I want you to be my informant. You live with him. You have access to his files, his laptop, his private conversations. You will report everything to me. When I give you a USB drive, you will plug it into his network. When I tell you to steal a document, you will steal it. You will systematically gut his career and his life, all while planning a beautiful wedding with him." "You're a monster," Cassidy whispered, nausea rising in her throat. "I am a businessman," Damien replied flawlessly, "and this is the cost of your father's life. You have until midnight to decide. If you say no, I will have Arthur Rowe dismembered, and I'll make sure Liam is the ADA assigned to identify the pieces." The days that followed felt like moving through thick, suffocating water. Cassidy had accepted the deal. She had no choice. At 11:59 p.m. that night, she had sent a single encrypted text message to the number Damien provided. "I'm in." Instantly, Arthur's debt was wiped from the syndicate's books. Her father called her the next morning, weeping tears of relief, thinking a clerical error or a miracle had saved him. Cassidy simply smiled through the phone, the ashes of her own soul choking her. Living with Liam became a psychological torture. Liam was a man of routines, loud laughs, and absolute conviction. Every morning he would kiss her forehead, talk about the scum he was going to put behind bars, and leave for the courthouse. Before Damien's ultimatum, Cassidy had admired Liam's relentless pursuit of justice. Now, every affectionate touch felt like a physical blow. She was a parasite living in his home, waiting to destroy him. Her first assignment came exactly a week later. A sleek black town car pulled up beside her. While she was walking to her architectural firm, the window rolled down to reveal Damien in the back seat. "Get in," he commanded. Cassidy hesitated, glancing around the busy Chicago street before sliding into the leather interior. The partition between them and the driver was raised. Damien handed her a small, brushed steel flash drive. "Liam is bringing a witness in for deposition tomorrow. A low-level trafficker named Hector," Damien said, not looking at her, his eyes fixed on a tablet. "Plug this into Liam's home laptop tonight. It will install a quiet little script that alters the timestamps on Hector's surveillance photos, making them completely inadmissible in court." "If I do this, a criminal walks free," Cassidy said, her fingers trembling as she held the cold metal drive. "If you don't do this, your father attends a closed-casket funeral," Damien replied smoothly, finally turning to look at her. He studied the dark circles under her eyes, the tension radiating from her rigid posture. "You look exhausted, Cassidy. Guilt is a heavy burden." "You wouldn't know anything about guilt. Damien let out a low, humorless laugh. I know enough to recognize it. You hate lying to him. You hate that every time he tells you he loves you, you know you're the knife pressing into his back. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a hypnotic murmur. But tell me, Cassidy, do you hate it because it's wrong? Or do you hate it because a small dark part of you is thrilled by the danger? I am not like you, she spat, turning her face away to hide the flush creeping up her neck. Because he was right. Beneath the terror and the profound guilt, there was a terrible electric adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her predictable, vanilla life had been shattered, and Damien Vitiello was the hurricane that broke the glass. "We'll see," Damien whispered. The car pulled to a stop outside her office building. "Tonight, Cassidy, don't disappoint me." That evening, while Liam was in the shower singing off-key, Cassidy sat at his desk. Her hands shook violently as she booted up his laptop. She knew his password. He used their anniversary. The screen illuminated the dark study. She inserted the drive. A small black command window flashed on the screen for 3 seconds, then vanished. It was done. She pulled the drive out just as the bathroom door opened. "Hey, babe," Liam called out, toweling his hair dry. "You looking up restaurants for Friday?" "Yeah," Cassidy lied smoothly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Just trying to find a reservation." She smiled at him, but inside she screamed. The operation worked perfectly. 2 days later, Liam came home furious, throwing his briefcase against the wall. The judge had thrown out the surveillance evidence due to digital tampering. The case against Hector collapsed. Liam spent the entire night pacing, cursing the corruption in the police precinct, entirely unaware the traitor was sitting on his couch, pouring him a glass of scotch. The dynamic between Cassidy and Damien began to shift over the next month. They met in the shadows, the back of art galleries, VIP rooms in subterranean clubs, empty warehouses near the docks. He never touched her inappropriately, but his presence was entirely consuming. He treated her not like a victim, but like a lethal weapon he was carefully sharpening. One evening he summoned her to a private balcony overlooking the glittering skyline of the city. He handed her a glass of rare red wine. "You're adapting beautifully," Damien noted, clinking his glass against hers. "You haven't flinched during the last 3 assignments." Liam's conviction rate has dropped by 30%. His superiors are starting to question his competence. Cassidy took a sip of the wine, the complex flavours coating her tongue. "Are we almost done? Have you broken him enough?" "I'm afraid we've barely started," Damien said, his gaze locking onto hers. "Because I haven't just been breaking him for my benefit. I've been doing it for yours." Cassidy frowned, a chill washing over her despite the warm summer wind. "What are you talking about?" Damien reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope, tossing it onto the wrought iron table between them. "I told you I wanted to ruin him because he was a nuisance to my business. That was true. But Liam Watson is not the righteous white knight you think he is, Cassidy. Look." Hesitantly, Cassidy set her glass down and opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers, and photographs. The bank accounts were offshore under a shell corporation, but the beneficiary's signature was undeniably Liam's. The photographs showed Liam meeting with men Cassidy didn't recognize, but they bore the harsh tattoos and cold demeanor of cartel enforcers. "Liam has been taking bribes from the Reyes cartel for 3 years, Damien stated, his voice devoid of any triumph, offering only cold, hard reality. "He aggressively prosecutes my men, not out of a sense of justice, but to clear the territory for his actual benefactors. Your fiancée is a bought and paid for asset of a rival syndicate." Cassidy stared at the documents, her vision swimming. No, this is fabricated. You forged this to mess with my head." "Look at the dates," Damien urged quietly, stepping around the table to stand beside her. "Look at the deposit on October 12th, 2 days before he bought you that 3-carat diamond ring. Look at the transfer on May 4th, the exact week he paid off the mortgage on the house you live in." The breath left Cassidy's lungs. The dates aligned perfectly. Every sudden windfall, every unexpected bonus Liam claimed came from the DA's office, matched the cartel deposits. The man she shared a bed with, the man she was bleeding her soul dry to protect, was as corrupt as the man standing beside her. Damien gently placed a hand on her shoulder. It was a warm, anchoring weight in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. "He sold his badge, Cassidy," Damien murmured, his thumb brushing the side of her neck. "He built a life with you on blood money. I may be a monster, but I've never lied to you about what I am. Liam has lied to you every single day." Tears of rage and profound betrayal spilled down Cassidy's cheeks. The guilt that had been crushing her for weeks instantly evaporated, replaced by a searing white-hot fury. She looked up at Damien, the Mafia boss who held her father's life in his hands, and realized with terrifying clarity that right now he was the only honest person in her life. "What do you want me to do next?" she asked, her voice dropping the tremble, laced now with the same dark steel that lived in Damien's eyes. Damien's lips curved into a predatory smile. "Now, my sweet Cassidy, we don't just ruin his career. Now we burn his entire world to the ground. Grief is a strange catalyst. It can paralyze, or it can liberate. For Cassidy Rowe, the shattering of her reality brought forth a terrifying, profound clarity. The man she had promised to marry, the man who kissed her forehead and spoke of righteousness, was nothing but a well-dressed parasite. The guilt that had gnawed at her conscience vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating desire for vengeance. She was no longer a victim paying her father's debt. She was Damien Vitiello's most dangerous asset. Over the next 3 weeks, their operation shifted from subtle sabotage to active dismantling. Cassidy no longer waited for Damien to issue instructions. She began hunting for vulnerabilities on her own. She knew Liam's habits intimately. She knew he kept a locked fireproof box in the floorboards of his home office closet, supposedly holding his late grandfather's war medals. One Tuesday afternoon, while Liam was prosecuting a high-profile case downtown, Cassidy bypassed the cheap master lock with a set of tension tools Damien had casually gifted her. Inside, she didn't find silver stars or purple hearts. She found burn phones, a stack of bearer bonds, and a ledger written in a crude shorthand. It was the Reyes cartel's payout schedule. She photographed every page, her hands completely steady. That evening she met Damien in the VIP lounge of the Obsidian, a high-end jazz club entirely owned by his syndicate. The jazz was loud enough to muffle their voices, the lighting dim enough to conceal the transaction. Damien scrolled through the high-resolution images on the encrypted tablet she slid across the table. His stormy eyes flickered with genuine impressed approval. "You extracted this from his floor safe? The one he claimed was alarmed?" "He lied about the alarm," Cassidy said, taking a slow sip of her bourbon. The burn in her throat felt grounding. "Just like he lied about everything else. I checked the IP addresses on the router logs too. He's been communicating with a man named Alejandro Reyes using an encrypted messaging app. Alejandro is the cartel's primary enforcer in the Midwest." Damien set the tablet down, his gaze studying her intensely. She had changed. The terrified, trembling architect who had marched into his office, pleading for her father's life, was gone. In her place sat a woman wrapped in dark silk and colder resolve, navigating the treacherous waters of the Chicago underworld with lethal grace. "You realize," Damien murmured, leaning over the small table, "that if Liam discovers you've breached his inner circle, he won't hesitate to kill you. The cartel does not tolerate loose ends, and Liam is a coward protecting his own skin." "He won't discover anything," Cassidy replied, her chin tilting up. "He looks at me and sees a naive, supportive fiancé picking out flower arrangements for our wedding. He underestimates me. That is his fatal flaw." "And what is your fatal flaw, Cassidy?" Damien asked softly, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was a stark contrast to his reputation, gentle, lingering, sparking a dangerous heat beneath her skin. "Right now," she breathed, holding his gaze, "I'm starting to enjoy this." The psychological warfare took a toll on Liam. As Damien systematically used the ledger's information to intercept Reyes cartel shipments and dismantle their distribution networks, Liam's paranoia skyrocketed. He lost weight. He paced the halls of their townhouse at night, clutching his phone, snapping at shadows. He began to suspect his colleagues at the district attorney's office, aggressively accusing innocent paralegals of leaking confidential case files. One evening, the tension finally snapped. Cassidy was reviewing blueprints in the living room when Liam burst through the front door, his eyes wide and bloodshot, his tie loosened. "Pack a bag," Liam ordered, his voice bordering on hysterical. He rushed past her, pulling a sleek black Glock from his shoulder holster and racking the slide. "We have to leave. Now." Cassidy stood up slowly, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm, though she kept her expression perfectly composed. "Liam, what's going on? You're scaring me." "Someone is feeding Vitiello my moves," Liam shouted, pacing like a caged animal. 3 of Alejandro's warehouses were raided by the feds this morning. Anonymous tips, perfect coordinates. The cartel thinks I sold them out to save myself. They're coming for me, Cass. They're coming for us. Cassidy felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. The collapse. Who would do that? Liam, why would the cartel care about you? He froze, realizing his slip, before waving his gun in a dismissive, frantic gesture. "It doesn't matter. I don't have time to explain the politics of the DA's office to you. Just pack your damn bags. We're going to the safe house in Wisconsin." Cassidy turned, her mind racing. She couldn't let him run. If he disappeared into the wind, Damien's plan, her revenge, would be incomplete. She walked into the bedroom, pulling out her phone. She tapped the panic button on the custom app Damien had installed, sending her real-time GPS coordinates directly to his security team. Then she walked back into the living room, leaving the suitcase completely empty. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Liam," she said, her voice dropping the facade of the frightened fiancé. Liam spun around, his weapon hanging loosely in his hand. "What did you just say?" "I said I'm not going," Cassidy repeated, stepping toward him, her eyes locking onto his. "And neither are you. Alejandro Reyes isn't the one who gave Damien Vitiello your coordinates. I did." Silence slammed into the room, heavy and absolute. Liam stared at her, his brain violently rejecting the words she had just spoken. He blinked, shaking his head, as if trying to dislodge water from his ears. "You?" Liam laughed, a high, broken sound. "Cassidy, stop playing around. This isn't the time for whatever stress-induced breakdown you're having. Get your bag." "October 12th, Cassidy stated coldly, reciting the dates from the ledger. "A $200,000 offshore wire transfer from Alejandro. May 4th, the mortgage payoff. Last Tuesday, the interception of the Vitiello shipment at the docks, orchestrated by you, handed over to the Reyes boys." The colour drained from Liam's face. The gun in his hand twitched. The mask of the righteous, loving partner evaporated, revealing the cornered, desperate rat beneath. He raised the barrel of the Glock, pointing it directly at her chest. "How?" he hissed, his hands shaking violently. "How could you possibly know that? You're a goddamn architect." "Because Arthur Rowe is my father," Cassidy replied, not stepping back, trusting the quiet, heavy footfalls she heard echoing in the hallway outside their door. "And when he owed Vitiello $3 million, I went to pay his debt. Damien didn't want my life, Liam. He wanted yours. And I was more than happy to hand it over once I realized the man I was sleeping next to was a bought and paid for cartel lapdog." Liam's face twisted into an ugly snarl of rage. "You stupid bitch. You think Vitiello cares about you? He used you. And now I'm gonna kill you. And I'll tell the cartel it was Damien's hitmen." His finger tightened on the trigger. Cassidy held her breath, staring down the barrel of the gun, refusing to close her eyes. The front door didn't just open. It exploded inward, splintering the frame into 1,000 jagged pieces. Before Liam could even pivot, a suppressed shot coughed through the air. Liam screamed, dropping the gun as his knee shattered. He collapsed onto the hardwood floor, clutching his leg, writhing in agony. Damien Vitiello stepped through the ruined doorway, a silenced pistol in his hand, looking as impeccable and unbothered as a man stepping off a private jet. Behind him, 3 massive enforcers flooded the room, securing the perimeter with chilling efficiency. Damien didn't look at the bleeding, sobbing man on the floor. His stormy eyes went straight to Cassidy. He walked toward her, holstering his weapon, and gently gripped her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low, thrumming with a dangerous protective edge. "No," Cassidy said, letting out a long, shaky exhale. "You're late." A dark, genuine smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Traffic on the Kennedy Expressway is unforgiving. My apologies." "Vitiello!" Liam screamed from the floor, his face pale with shock and blood loss. "You can't do this. The Reyes cartel will go to war for this. I am under their protection." Damien finally turned, looking down at Liam with the detached disgust one might reserve for a crushed insect. "Alejandro Reyes is currently sitting in a federal holding cell. His entire operation was raided tonight, thanks to the meticulous anonymous documentation provided by my brilliant associate here." Damien gestured gracefully to Cassidy. "The cartel doesn't protect liabilities, Liam. They eliminate them." Liam's eyes darted wildly between Damien and Cassidy, the full weight of his destruction finally sinking in. He hadn't just been outplayed, he had been entirely dismantled by the woman he thought he owned. "What happens now?" Liam gasped, coughing as the shock set in. "You gonna put a bullet in my head?" "As I told Cassidy on the day we met," Damien said smoothly, adjusting his cuffs, "martyrs are bad for business. No, Liam, we aren't going to kill you." Right on cue, the wail of police sirens pierced the night air, growing rapidly louder. Red and blue lights began to strobe through the townhouse windows, painting the living room in chaotic, frantic colours. "I tipped off the FBI's Internal Affairs Division an hour ago," Cassidy said, stepping forward, looking down at the man she almost married. "I gave them the ledger. I gave them your burner phones. I gave them everything. You're going to federal prison, Liam. And when the cartel finds out you were the one who kept the files that got Alejandro arrested, well, I imagine your time in lockup will be very brief and incredibly painful." Liam sobbed, a pathetic, wretched sound, pressing his forehead against the floor. "Time to go," Damien murmured, placing a firm, guiding hand on the small of Cassidy's back. They walked out the back door, slipping into the shadows of the alleyway, where a sleek black town car sat waiting, its engine purring quietly. As they climbed into the luxurious leather interior, the sounds of FBI agents storming the front of the house echoed behind them. The partition rolled up, sealing them in absolute privacy. The car pulled away, leaving the wreckage of Liam Watson's life in the rearview mirror. Cassidy sank back into the seat, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb, leaving a strange, intoxicating hum in her veins. She looked over at Damien. He was watching her, the streetlights illuminating the sharp, ruthless angles of his face. "Your father's debt is paid," Damien said quietly, the air between them thick and charged. "Liam is ruined. You are entirely free, Cassidy. I can have my driver drop you anywhere in the world. You can go back to your quiet life." Cassidy looked down at her hands. They weren't trembling. They felt strong. The quiet life she once knew felt like a faded black and white photograph. She had tasted the power, the danger, and the absolute loyalty of the king of the underworld. She didn't want the light anymore. She wanted the dark. She reached out, her fingers wrapping around the lapel of Damien's bespoke suit, and pulled him in. "I don't want a quiet life," Cassidy whispered against his lips right before she kissed him. "I want yours." Damien let out a low growl, pulling her flush against his chest, claiming her mouth with a fierce, possessive hunger. The ledger was closed. The debt was settled. But their reign over the ashes of the city had only just begun. If this breathless descent into the dark underworld left your heart pounding, you won't want to miss what happens next. Hit that like button, share this story with your fellow dark romance lovers, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more twisted, high-stakes Mafia drama. Drop a comment below. Would you have made the same deal Cassidy did to save your family? Let us know, and stay tuned for our next thrilling release.